Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is, Friday? It's Friday, January 22nd, 2021. Well, so far so good. No further insurrection, as far as I can tell. So that's good news. And really, honestly, isn't it the appearance of insurrection we have to be worried about? Plenty going on, of course, and the Biden administration getting off to hitting the ground running, at least we can say, in taking their executive actions, already bothering, disturbing the Republicans who have rediscovered their opposition to unilateral executive action. And I don't know, I guess reading the Q news forums, these types of people, Lauren Boebert constantly complaining about these things. And by the way, just by way of update, she continues to violate the new protocols, let's say, if not new rules, about carrying weapons onto the House floor. She continues to walk through and set off the magnetometers every time and head straight through. And police continue. I don't know how much longer they can continue to do this, where the police have no instruction about what to do about the fact that she does this. And she's not the only one, although it's funny, she's probably the highest profile in terms of giving them advance notice that she was going to be doing this. But other members are doing the same thing. And some of them are even making efforts to comply with the rule about weapons on the House floor. They're carrying weapons elsewhere, but making I don't know if it would be fair to say making a show of it. Say they're making an effort, I think, to comply with the rule. The rule, such as it is that the Speaker can impose a fine that is deducted directly from a member's pay for every violation of the rule. And Lauren Boebert, I guess, is taking some pride in racking up those fines. And then, of course, she'll be crying of poverty later on and insisting that it's a Second Amendment violation, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, she seems to be interested in racking up those fines. And other members, though, are actually seeking to avoid them. And I think if I saw correctly, it's getting to be so trivial that I don't think I've parked any of the stories in Pocket, but there are a few members, and I think Andy Harris, maybe from Maryland, who I didn't know was into such things, is among them. But also, I think I saw mentioned, is it Andy Biggs as well? So I'm worried that I'm confusing the two of them, from Arizona, who's also doing the same. And I think the magnetometers went off on Don Young the other day. And the story I saw very quickly across Twitter, and I'm not certain I can even dig the thing up, but, we can search for it perhaps during one of the breaks, was that he set off the magnetometer, groused about something and said this is ridiculous, and handed something out of his coat or out of his pocket to his wife, who I believe works on his staff. Also not terribly uncommon, but really frowned upon, but especially among the older members who basically operate with impunity, people like Republicans from Alaska, and handed her something that reporters in the area said looked like a knife. I don't know what kind of knife. Swiss Army knife? Was it one of the little credit card knives used for utility stuff and opening up boxes? Or a gigantic stabbing weapon? I don't know. But apparently this is something that Don Young has something of a reputation for carrying around as well, including some other members of the press who recounted some tale from the hoary past in which he threatened another member with a knife. And I believe they offered up that other member was not yet having risen to his final position of prominence, but was John Boehner, nonetheless. So, he's a colorful guy, that Don Young. He's done such interesting things as stick his hand in a bear trap to show that it wasn't really inhumane. And guess what? Apparently it was. And Don Young is here to complain about that right now, apparently, in the background. Anyway, so one of the other members also, I should look these things up. Maybe we'll do it over the, maybe we're just live on the air. We'll just spend a little time Googling around for it or searching for it in Twitter. But one of the other members handed off got to the metal detectors and, again, groaned and said, now I remember. The magnetometer has reminded me, I've got a gun with me, which really is not, the ideal way of carrying weapons with you. You really want to be aware of the fact that you've got one on you. And he was very upset because, and I think this may have been Harris, he was very upset because he started loudly complaining, I guess, in front of the reporters to his staff. You were supposed to remind me. Like, it's the staff's responsibility to remind the congressman that he's walking around armed and has a loaded gun in his coat in case he forgets. So he very loudly groused about it, handed it over to staff, went through the magnetometer. But apparently, in looking around for staffers to take this thing, found that, as is often the case, as he has approached the floor, the staff have peeled off and gone back to work in the office. They don't follow their boss onto the House floor for something like this, and there were no staffers around, so he was looking for a friendly face who might help him out and say, hey, hold this for me. What's in this package? I don't know. Well, it's a loaded gun. Apparently I tried to hand it off to somebody and they were like, I'm not taking your gun, and I don't have a gun permit either, so you're not going to catch me taking this off your hands. Anyway, I don't know, just Republican weirdness. They're clearly not ready for the stunts they're trying to pull, unless the stunt is simply walking onto the floor and ignoring the magnetometer. That takes the least preparation. You should probably just go with that one. All right, well, here we are with the show underway. Bill tells us all the way from Portland, Maine. Let's see what he's got on tap today. Maybe you got a more interesting show in mind, Bill. Let's see. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. Today, Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman. Message me on Twitter or use that KITM hashtag. So go with either the Kagro X and preferably also the KITM hashtag so that I can catch your comment. What are we doing? Well, we prepare you for a seismic event. That sounds interesting. Poised to sweep across the United States for the first time in years, the return of the quiet weekend. Yes, brace yourselves. I was musing in the Morning Post that this might be something we rediscover now that we've exited the Trump era. Trump always, well, it was always his aim to keep us all on the edge of our seats as though this was an entertainment program. Not this one. This one is sort of an entertainment program, but the world in general was just sort of one big Truman show for him, and he wanted to keep everybody in suspense about whether or not he might do some crazy action or dissolve the United States or launch an insurrection and get people killed or kill 500,000 people unnecessarily with COVID, whatever it might be. And that there was no respite over the weekend because that would be the time when he would do his anger tweeting and make people worry that the president might take some capricious action that would damage the health, safety, or prosperity or other, pick your iteration of liberty and freedom that he would ruin for you over the weekend. And I have a feeling we might be returning at some point to the normal news cycle, with the possible exception of weekend insurrection against the government of the United States. All right, well, let's see if we can't comb through what is in pocket. And, I'd make a note to myself, but I've lost my pen somewhere along the way. But we'll take a look for those gun incidents as reported via Twitter. Armando already engaged with the disingenuous Mr. Turley over Turley's ridiculous claims about how impeachment would go. By the way, again, no action on impeachment so far. Nothing happening. No agenda being derailed in the Senate. All business proceeds apace, and even some cabinet level and other high ranking advisors who require Senate approval, clearing the body at this point, and a few Senate committee hearings on other nominations going forward as well. No interruptions from the impeachment issue. It so far presents no obstacle, but I guess Armando arguing with Turley. Turley is essentially recycling his writing from the past couple of days and weeks and upsetting us all with recycling the dumbest and least well-founded claims so far. Let's see, this one, Turley, I guess he's got a thread going. And is this a reiteration of this same old? Yeah, essentially. The line he used in his last op-ed, that the primary purpose of the trial, an impeachment trial, is to determine whether the president shall be removed. Of course, that's not necessarily the primary purpose of the trial. It's one of two named purposes, and there's really no indication of which is the primary and which is not. And he quotes rather, I mean, he's got it. He's got a piece of the relevant language from the Constitution quoted here, but he has 5 words quoted, and there is also an ellipsis, which should really tell you something. If you're only quoting 5 words and you need an ellipsis, something is weird about this. But anyway, yeah, the primary purpose he says, of the trial is to determine whether the president shall be removed. At the second Trump trial, the president will be Joe Biden. That's true. So the Senate will hold a curious vote to decide whether to remove a president who has already gone. And, well, he goes on here, but we'll tell you about where Armando rebuts him. Continues here and says, any new Congress could come into power and set about disqualifying opponents from public office despite their being private citizens. A Republican Congress could have retroactively impeached Obama or retried Clinton. The Senate needs a threshold vote on these questions. And it might make some sense, if they want to, for the Senate to hold a vote on whether or not they have jurisdiction to continue with or to undertake a trial for Trump. They don't need to, in that the precedent has been set, of course, with the Belknap case. But I suppose if you wanted to, there would be grounds for saying, all right, well, one was a Secretary of War and one was a former president, and one was a resignation before the end of a term, and the other was simply returning to private life at the natural conclusion of a term. And if that makes you feel like you need a new vote, go ahead and do it. And then if the majority votes that you have jurisdiction, then Turley's problem is settled forever and he can shut up and go away. Not that I expect that to be the case, but I guess he's also trying to argue that there needs to be, at the conclusion of a trial, another vote as to whether or not the conviction vote is, applicable to anything. I guess what he's trying to argue is that the only automatic consequence of a conviction vote is removal from office. And so therefore that vote is itself on shaky grounds because the person you're voting about can't be removed from office because they're already out. But if you also view the conviction vote as yes, carrying an automatic removal from office along with it. If you simply view that as removal from office if necessary, but if not necessary, then it's simply a threshold vote, a gateway vote to permitting a subsequent vote on disqualification from office. So I don't know. And I'm not certain why he thinks like that's so scary to hold out the possibility of a retroactive impeachment of Obama or Clinton, for that matter. If you wanted at the conclusion of those votes to disqualify them from future office holding, I don't see why you couldn't do it. I could see why you wouldn't do it, and it's because you wouldn't get 2/3, and there would be no real reason even for the people who dislike him there'd be no real grounds for claiming that there was a groundswell of public interest in seeing these punishments imposed on those ex-presidents. But then again, those two were already barred from running for the presidency again by, what was it, with 22nd Amendment, the one that limits you to 2 terms elected as president. So I suppose you could have barred them from holding other federal office. And there are ones that are out there that I could see somebody accepting even after holding the presidency twice. I think it's still a step down, and maybe archaic to think of people like or public servants in the vein of, I guess, William Howard Taft, who would serve on the Supreme Court after being president. These days, probably not so much a real possibility, but if you want to disqualify them from office, I guess you can go ahead and do that. Armando had been responding to it, by the way, just by pointing out, the Senate doesn't vote separately on this thing. They do vote separately on disqualification if there's a conviction, but no, there's no need for a vote first after the trial, but before a vote on conviction, to determine whether or not you're allowed to vote on conviction. If you want to have it, I guess you could have it. It would do no harm, but be a real waste of time. Anyway, I don't know. We'll see whether Armando wants to continue to discuss the issues surrounding the impeachment. I saw yesterday that at some point McConnell threw out another proposal that the Senate wait until February, and I'm not certain when in February, because February 1st is not that long from now, not that far away. I don't know why he would propose waiting only until February 1st, but he proposed waiting until at least February to schedule the start of this trial. He's not supposed to be in control of scheduling at this point. That decision should be up to the majority leader, and right now that's not Mitch McConnell, but Chuck Schumer. But, that doesn't mean that he can't opine on when he thinks would be a convenient time for the trial to start. He's welcome to do so, and whatever. You can't stop him. So do we think it's a good idea, bad idea? I don't know. Like I said, we're almost at February anyway, so no skin off my nose, I suppose. Although competing with the increase, or the increasing sense that we get because of the increasing number of arrests and the evidence being developed, that the attack on the Capitol was so much worse than we originally anticipated or originally understood it to be. Well, some people anyway. I think we here kind of knew what it was right off the bat. But with each passing day, more revelations about just how bad it was and just how dangerous it was and just how close we came to losing control of everything. By the same token, I think it's fair to say that the passage of time also lets the general public come around to the feeling that it's now becoming distant past, and the heat and passion with which a lot of people insisted in the days immediately afterward that people be held accountable, including Trump, might arguably be fading with the passage of time, and that's a little worrisome too. Let's see. I just happened to scroll by and see Jameson Foser making comment on the same subject, in this a comment some 12 hours old here, but noting the tweet from Ross Garber, which I saw got a lot of attention and response yesterday. Ross Garber is who? I don't know. We'll check it out. Political investigations and impeachment lawyer. Well, so he claims anyway. Teaching at Tulane Law School, and I guess he's got a piece in Politico, maybe. Anyway, he says Senate Republicans are uniting behind impeachment defense that the Senate lacks jurisdiction to try a former president. And maybe we'll even check into that. I don't know whether he also advocates for it or is, but I guess if he's the one who's authored the article. Oh, he's not. It's an Andrew Desiderio article. So it may just be a recitation of fact that that's where the Republicans are congregating in terms of mounting their defense, such as it is, of Trump. But Garber, noting that, answered by Jameson Foster here, who says, so delay the trial until Trump leaves office. Then claim you don't have jurisdiction to conduct the trial because he's out of office. Nothing Republicans do or say is in good faith. It's all BS. Never pretend otherwise. Good night. And that was, of course, tweeted last night, at which point it would have been appropriate to tell everybody good night. And, well, yeah, that about sums it up. But as we know, there's historical precedent for handling things afterwards anyway, so it's not too worrisome. We can take a look at that Politico piece here. Although, yeah, well, we might as well do that as we're running up to the break. Then, a reminder, I want to get back to discussion of what senators ought to be doing now that they are trying to conduct some committee business and clear some of President Biden's nominees for cabinet and other high-ranking positions, and how they ought to be going about that, given the fact that they're still fighting over their organizing resolution. Well, let me see what's in the Politico piece here. Senate Republicans uniting behind impeachment defense. GOP members are backing a bid to dismiss Trump's trial by claiming it's unconstitutional. Okay, so you know the story here. Senate Republicans coalescing around a long-shot bid to dismiss the impeachment trial of former President Donald Trump before it even begins, relying on a disputed legal argument, well put, that says putting an ex-president on trial is unconstitutional. Interviews with more than a dozen GOP senators revealed broad support for the claim that the Senate has no constitutional authority to put a private citizen on trial, which could translate into a substantial number of votes to scrap the trial altogether. The issue came up several times during a Senate GOP conference call on Thursday afternoon, according to multiple senators. And I can see it would be an attractive dodge, and all the senators, even those who haven't given much thought to the idea at all, would love to jump on that bandwagon. Let's see. Here's Minority Whip John Thune from South Dakota saying in an interview that concerns about the constitutionality of putting a former office holder on trial, which is a dumb way of putting it because we've already done that, were top of mind among GOP senators, even those who are open to voting to convict Trump on the House's charge that he incited the insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th that left 5 people dead. Our members, irrespective of what they might think about the merits, just believe that this is an exercise that really isn't grounded constitutionally and, from a practical standpoint, just makes no sense. Thune said that's just willful blindness to the disqualification penalty that's hanging out there. But critics, including scholars from the Conservative Federalist Society, remember them, and other right-leaning organizations, maintain that the argument is on flimsy legal ground. Moreover, federal courts have consistently deferred to Congress's sole power to set its own rules and procedures, including over impeachment proceedings. Oh, is that right? I read that as saying that the Federalist Society critics were saying that they were critical of Thune's position that it isn't grounded constitutionally. Well, that would be a surprise for them to hold fast on that. Still, Republicans' contention is shaping up to be a central theme of the ex-president's defense strategy in the Senate's upcoming trial, even though he has no defense lawyers to date, with several GOP senators publicly echoing it in recent days, even as they signal increased hostility toward Trump over the attack on the Capitol. I think the key point is it constitutional to do this when somebody is out of office? And then it is purely retribution when you try to push it forward. Senator Mike Braun, does he say Brown? Braun? I don't know how he pronounces that. Never did bother to figure that out, even during the first impeachment trial. Anyway, just like the first impeachment trial, he's just, off the mark and saying whatever it takes to say that they shouldn't hold the president or Trump, whatever you want to call him, accountable for anything. Well, anyway, then he goes on to say, that's not to dismiss any of the enormity of the day itself. Here comes Lindsey Graham. I think it's one of the most potent arguments for Trump. Absolutely. He added Senator Lindsey Graham, top Trump ally, who's been pushing for a vote on dismissing the trial at its outset. Indeed, the Senate has never put a former president on trial on impeachment charges, though in 1876, you know what happened, the Senate tried former Secretary of War William Belknap after he had already resigned. Supporters of the Senate's authority to try an ex-official appointed to the Belknap trial to underscore that a president or any other person subject to impeachment could simply resign or otherwise leave office to evade punishment. If I'm an official, if an official could only be disqualified while he or she still held office, then an official who betrayed the public trust and was impeached could avoid accountability simply by resigning 1 minute before the Senate's final conviction vote. A bipartisan group of legal scholars, including prominent conservatives, wrote on Thursday. How interesting. Where did they write that on Thursday? Oh, in Politico. Anyway, so that's how Politico knows. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Minority Leader Mitch McConnell still need to iron out a framework which will outline the rules and procedures of a trial. McConnell on Thursday also proposed delaying by 2 weeks an appropriate tribute to Trump to allow Trump to prepare his defense strategy, although it's unclear if Schumer will agree. And by the way, that is an interesting thing. The Senate could just say, to hell with all of that. I don't care whether you have a lawyer or a defense strategy or not. We're going forward with the trial. So it's actually a courtesy to Trump to have waited this long, even though he's still having difficulty finding counsel on this. The framework will spell out whether to allow for a motion to dismiss the trial at its outset. I mean, that is something that a majority could preclude from even happening. That does rest in the Democratic leader's hands here if he wants to. Okay. Well, that vote, of course, would signal the likelihood of the Senate convicting Trump, but it wouldn't substitute for it. 17 Republicans would need to join all Democrats for Trump to be convicted. Some senators said they are considering supporting such a motion, if one is offered, as a way of voicing their objection to putting a former president on trial. It might be wise just to avoid that whole thing right from the outset, because, why even give them a chance at winning? That's my argument. The precedent is set. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Phew, okay, just running around trying to clear everything out and make sure I can roll forward here. Where we left off was with the Politico article recounting the current state of affairs as between Democrats and Republicans in the Senate and their views on whether or not a trial can or should go forward. And we left off here by noting that Democrats who now control the Senate are intent on holding a trial, even as Speaker Nancy Pelosi has, not yet formally transmitted the impeachment article to the other side of the Capitol. So just keeping track of that, I want you to know that's where we stand. And I keep taking a look to see whether it might be reflected over at Congress.gov and see how they track things this time and see if it's consistent with the last time. Anyway, as you know, it is the messaging of as between the houses that triggers things. And once the impeachment managers bring over the impeachment articles and exhibit them, i.e. read them to the Senate, that triggers the start of the trial. That would be what they're waiting for, whether they wait until February or begin now. All right. Well, let's see. So Pelosi hasn't yet formally transmitted the impeachment article to the other side of the Capitol. Schumer declared as much after the House impeached Trump last week. That is, that they were intent on holding a trial, though Democrats have not yet decided how long the trial should last. which will be dictated by whether they decide to call witnesses as part of the proceedings, and I guess this time it's up to them. Top lawmakers from both parties, though, are predicting a relatively short trial. Trump's first impeachment trial lasted 3 weeks, but that was only after a weeks-long impeachment inquiry in the House yielded hundreds of pages of evidence and legal arguments. Representative Jamie Raskin of Maryland, the House's lead impeachment manager, said Thursday that an upcoming trial will not last as long as the previous one. That's in part because this time the House did not conduct a formal investigation, and several senators have said calling witnesses is not necessary because lawmakers were all witnesses to the siege on the Capitol and because Trump's actions and statements were on full public display. I'm not certain I actually agree with all of that. And again, I want to remind them anyway that the option is available to them to hold the trial in committee if they're really worried about using up valuable floor time that is needed for other priorities. One, that's a help with that. Two, it also removes the worry about spending weeks developing further evidence. And I really think that it probably does need to be developed. And in one sense, there's the open and shut case of, well, you sent an armed mob to the Capitol, and that's really all there is to it. And we all saw that. And if you want to vote, as a Republican and go on the record as saying that's okay, then I guess go right ahead. But if you have any integrity whatsoever and any interest in jealously guarding your prerogatives, as James Madison would have had you do, then you know what to do when the time comes to vote. But I don't know. I think that it might be of some considerable interest to develop facts and call some witnesses to help establish. I imagine even if you did that, though, there would still be Republicans who, in speaking to the charges and their view of them and how they intend to vote, would say, I acknowledge that the attack happened, but I deny that the president had anything to do with it. And, the words of incitement that Democrats claim are what sent people over here, they don't mean the same thing to me. And it might be of some value, even if they don't further develop any evidence, to put on a presentation at least of what the president said, what Trump said, and how about some of the video of the attackers at the door screaming in the faces of the police that the police needed to stand down and get out of their way because they had been sent there by the President of the United States, and this was their mission, and they were only following his orders. Now, I assume that there are probably a good, probably a good 30 plus, maybe 40 plus Republicans who would ignore that anyway and just say, I don't care that they said that. Or some who would even say, I guess maybe over in the House, you have people like Marjorie Taylor Greene who would just say, well, that's fake news. That's doctored video or something like that. I don't think senators would necessarily resort to that, but they'll just say, well, that's just a crazy person's misunderstanding of our president's very kind and totally constitutional words that day. And he never says bash a cop over the head with a fire extinguisher, so not guilty. And that's, they'll never develop their thinking any further than that. All right. Well, let's see. Where were we with this? The trial might last less time because there was no formal investigation, and there's pros and cons to that. It's not like we need much information on the merits of the case. That was Senator Braun, who said that one. We were here, but you were also busy denying that you should be counting the electoral votes at the time, so I'm not so sure you had any real understanding of what was going on while you were there. I guess the public record is your television screen, Graham quipped. I don't see why this would take a long time, seeing everything in simplistic terms as Republicans are wont to do. Apart from the constitutional arguments, Republicans are questioning why Democrats want to put Trump on trial when President Joe Biden is emphasizing unity and bipartisanship, noting that an impeachment trial is among the most divisive undertakings on Capitol Hill. Now, that is ordinarily true. By the way, this is a great way to, No one will understand it because they'll be willful about it and insist that they don't want to understand it. But it would be good jujitsu if people were paying attention. An impeachment trial is among the most divisive undertakings on Capitol Hill, usually. But that's because the person being impeached is usually in office. And it's divisive because you're talking about somebody to whom a large part of both the House and Senate will owe some current political loyalty to because they are either the incumbent president or perhaps one of the officers nominated by the incumbent president. And that's not the case here. There are no major policy consequences involved in this decision. There aren't policies that are popular with a significant portion of the Senate that will be disrupted and derailed because the president who champions them is dismissed from office. They don't stand to lose anything on policy grounds. There's zero policy at stake here. Purely a question of whether or not what he did deserves constitutional level reprimand and banning from future public service, impeachment, and and the consequences that come with it. That's what makes it a divisive undertaking. It shouldn't be, I guess it is also divisive to say, well, some of you still worship this idiot as a hero and we don't. That's what makes it divisive. True, but senators sort of get the big bucks to lay that aside and decide things on grounds of constitutionality and policy impact. Since there's no policy impact here and the constitutional grounds have been laid, there's really no barrier here to doing the right thing, but you're insisting on constructing one. Good job. Anyway, to conclude with this article here, I'm not sure why it helps the Dems either. I know there's an awful lot of antipathy for the former president, but they've got a new lease on life, Thune said. Let bygones, whether they be insurrections against the government or not, be bygones, is his position. They've got the White House, they've got the majority in the Senate, they've got a lot of stuff they want to do. They want to rehash the last 4 years, and it doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense. Commentary, if necessary, on that. Yeah, they've got the White House and they've got the majority of this in the Senate. They've got a majority in the House as well. And the question at stake is, what is that worth to any government, this one or any future government? What's the point of having the presidency and having a majority in both houses or one house or whatever if a minority from the other side can, with impunity, be stirred to attack the legislative branch and attempt to assassinate its top officers at the order of an already, by the vote count anyway, expelled chief executive? Well, if that's not worth anything to you, then fine, go home, stop collecting your pay, and stop complaining. But if you have any loyalty to the oath you took to A, uphold the Constitution, and B, to do so by guarding the prerogatives of the legislative branch against predations from the executive, including killing you, then there's really no other choice but to go ahead with the trial and to vote to convict. Republicans have been urging Biden to step in to halt or otherwise impede the Senate trial on the grounds that it will delay consideration of his cabinet nominees as well as his legislative agenda, which it won't, which includes another round of COVID-19 relief. But of course, for him to do that would be not an impermissible, but perhaps unwise interference in the legislative branch's internal affairs. Anyway, it'll be incredibly divisive for the country. There's that good old message again. This time, Marco Rubio parroting it here, middle of the massive pandemic, which you won't help with. We've got all those nominations we need to do, and so what? Go ahead. We've got all these threats around the world that we've got to focus on, and now you've got a president that reads the PDB, so you're better off there too. There's a lot to be done. The notion that we're going to spend a week or 2 weeks on a trial on somebody who's not even in office sounds like a waste of time. It isn't, and I can help you avoid it anyway. Put it in committee. Pelosi pushed back against the contention earlier Thursday, saying bluntly, the President of the United States committed an act of incitement of insurrection. I don't think it's very unifying to say, oh, let's just forget it and move on. That's not how you unify. And true, that's the case. Burgess Everett, what's his name? Burgess Everett. I note at the bottom, as they do in italics, that he contributed to this report. And the two of them were also behind the recent report, now laughably wrong on its face and still unacknowledged, that there was nothing anybody could do except by unanimous consent to stop the trial from beginning Wednesday at 1 o'clock. It's now Friday, currently 9:40 or so, a little bit after, and still no trial. And the two of them were writing about how trials might not start until February, which seems like maybe it needs some correction. But I'm sure they think, let bygones be bygones, no point in dragging up the past, etc., etc. So maybe we understand why they might have some natural sympathy to the Republican position on this, even if that's not the case. I mean, they did a fine job writing the article. This article is fine, and I wouldn't go back necessarily and bother with any of that. And maybe they did. Maybe they went back and corrected it. For all I know, I haven't taken a look at the article. Probably not worth my time. They probably didn't make a correction. They probably are just chalk it up to, hey, a source told us that and turned out to be wrong. Big deal. And they did a fine job, as I said, with this one. In the lead paragraph here, they come right out. In a long shot bid to dismiss it, a disputed legal argument, and they noted contrary authority, though I didn't see them quoting any of them. That might have been helpful too, but they did link to places where you could find such quotes if you were interested. All right. Since we're on the arcana of procedure, I might as well note for the record here, my own hobby horse, my next hobby horse, I guess, in addition to pointing out that people can, in fact, that the Senate can, in fact, conduct this trial in committee. They seem determined not to acknowledge that as a possibility, and I'm not really sure why, and it might be that they actually prefer having a trial on the Senate floor because it would be higher profile and more people would watch it. And if they have it in committee, they would have to depend, if they wanted uninterrupted coverage of the trial on television, they'd have to depend on C-SPAN 3, which not even, a lot of people don't even have, and a lot of people don't even know exists, though it actually, there's a real call for it, because one of the few drawbacks of C-SPAN 1 and 2 is that they are, they're required by something. I don't know what the something is, but they're required to cover the proceedings in the House and the Senate on channels 1 and 2 whenever they are in session. Now, when they're not in session, they can cut away and cover other politically related things, not always necessarily related to the legislative branch. They have a lot more editorial control than that, but I guess they're sort of contractually obligated that when the gavel drops in either of the two houses, even if it's for a pro forma session where everybody knows they're not going to do anything, they've got to cover it. And sometimes if they're covering something else that's very important to people, they will do a split screen, but they got to cut away. So if the House is in session and the Senate's in session, but a Senate committee is considering the trial, they might opt to cover that on C-SPAN 3. They might opt to split screens if nothing important is expected to happen in the Senate, but they'll have to juggle these two things if they move to a Senate trial in committee. But anyway, speaking of committees, a lot of notice taken yesterday of the weird anomaly that comes of not having an organizing resolution in place for the Senate and how to deal with many things, including committee assignments and committee control in a 50-50 Senate. It's still kind of looking like the model for how to handle the committees will be drawn from the 2001 power sharing agreement as between the very closely divided and 50-50 Senate in that year, which would basically mean 50-50 representation on the committees, with the caveat that, one, the chairmanship is understood to reside with the majority party, the Democrats, and two, that anticipating a number of deadlocked votes, the usual committee rules which would be adopted at the outset of each new Congress. The committee can adopt its own rules. The default committee rules for most committees, if not all committees, is that a tie vote does not advance the legislation from out of committee and out to the floor. The question of reporting the legislation out requires a majority vote. And in some cases, some committees are kind of stupid and have other weird additions to the rules that not only does it have to be a majority vote, but that it means that one member of the minority has to be included. And you might think, well, of course, that's the only way you would get to a majority vote in a closely divided Senate, but that's not necessarily the case. Some committees sometimes, stack the odds in their favor by having one or two additional votes from the majority there. Or then, of course, there are absences as well. And you can get a majority vote by virtue of the fact that all members of the majority vote for it, and even in an evenly divided committee, if a Republican member is absent, you might end up getting a majority vote, but including only majority members. So they sometimes say, well, you got to have one member of the minority vote to clear the thing. Variants like that. But so that would usually prevent a tie vote from favorably, anyway, reporting legislation out of a committee. But the 2001 power sharing agreement, and likely this one too, would contemplate at least letting a neutral report go forward on a tie vote so that tied committees can in fact still be functional and consider, nobody wants the committee process and the committee system to be the automatic death knell of any piece of important legislation for lack of it being able to get a majority in a deadlocked Senate. So it's actually, quite a reasonable concession on behalf of what could be a combative minority at this point, and it's good to see it based on a previous agreement. Not that I thought that the previous agreement was, so fantastic and bipartisan. Certainly no kumbaya singing involved in that one. But carrying that forward makes a great deal of sense. But speaking of the constitution of these committees, and I don't mean capital C constitution, but the makeup of these committees, lots of discussion in the last couple of days of the organizing resolution and what it means. And there should be some throwback consideration, since we're all busy looking back to 2001 and the power sharing agreement that existed then. You would be justified in looking back on how closely divided or even tied Senates in the past constituted their committees. And there's more to it than just the 2001 agreement. The current fight I don't think that they'll move too much from the idea of adopting the even division of committee seats and the allowance of a deadlocked vote to move legislation forward. But the mechanism by which people are appointed to these committees at all is the organizing resolution. And while people are learning now about the difficulties of getting an organizing resolution settled and agreed to, because it has to be adopted on the floor, they're watching McConnell hold out for an agreement to lock in the continued existence of the filibuster. He's asked the majority, he's asked Chuck Schumer and the Democrats to include in whatever power sharing agreement they should agree on an additional codicil saying that during the next 2 years, the 117th Congress, nobody will, you won't try to eliminate the filibuster in any way at all for the legislation on the floor. And that should be, a minimum requirement of our going forth together in good faith as a 50-50 Senate to try to work things out. Well, we discussed a little bit of that. Obviously, the Democrats not interested in that, and all reports are that Schumer has heard the caucus on that one and the grassroots and rank and file and has refused that one. There's really no reason for him to give that up, given that there's really nothing being offered in return. And if you're wondering, why is it that McConnell would come to the table with a deal that says, you give us this, and that's it. That's all we're giving you. It's because implicit in it is what his offer actually is. It's just unstated because it makes him look bad. But the unstated offering from McConnell here is that we won't stand in the way of the organizing resolution. You've agreed to give us equal representation on the committees, and that's great. Totally fine with ratifying that. But if we don't get your agreement to essentially unilaterally disarm on the nuclear option, then we will filibuster the organizing resolution. And people, as we said yesterday, rightly pointing out, Brian Boyler, I thought, very early and clearly on this, pointing out that what's happening here is that McConnell is insisting on preserving the filibuster, even though he anticipates Democrats will charge, quite correctly, that Republicans are abusing the filibuster at some point later on to block extremely important and very popular and very necessary legislation, whether it's on COVID relief or restoration of voting rights or the fight against voter suppression. Two sides of the same coin there, whatever it is, name your issue, climate legislation, any of the extremely important pieces that nonetheless are viewed by Republicans as controversial, though no one else, but essentially promising that they will abuse the filibuster, but trying to extract a promise that Democrats won't do anything about it. And to demonstrate his dedication to abusing the filibuster and continuing to abuse the filibuster, he is going to abuse the filibuster to extract a promise from Democrats not to do anything about it later when he abuses it a second time. Because filibustering the organizing resolution is, fairly well within the bounds of what would be considered abuse of the filibuster right now. However, I will point out that filibustering the organizing resolution, which has, of course, the effect of preventing the committees from organizing and taking care of their business in a way that includes 1/3 of the newly elected or re-elected senators in the Senate, and we'll explain in just a minute, but it prevents the committees from going forward in normal fashion and organizing and conducting the business of the Senate in the ways that they normally do. So Republicans will stand in the way of that to extract this promise on the filibuster that they really just aren't entitled to. I mean, the majority says that they'll handle things the way they want to, and that's that. They could offer them the fig leaf of the Gang of 14 agreement and say, yeah, sure, we agree not to get rid of the filibuster except in extraordinary circumstances, and we won't tell you what that means. That was good enough for the Gang of 14. Some of you are still here in Congress, actually. Very few, but some, Lindsey Graham. And, I guess we could hold that out there to see whether you're hypocrites and now tell us that the terms that you insisted on when you were the toast of Washington as the Gang of 14 were, in fact, now you regard them as stupid and illegitimate. Anyway, so the point of all of this, as we head into our second break, is to remind everybody that 1/3 of the Senate saw its terms expire at the end of the 116th Congress, which came officially on January 3rd of this year, January 3rd, 2021. 1/3 of the Senate became vacant. Now, they were immediately replaced by everybody incoming, people who had been reelected, people who were newly elected, minus, of course, the 2 seats from Georgia, and eventually someone to replace Kamala Harris in California. Yes, but they've all taken their seats again, many of them reelected to the same seats they occupied before, but their terms having expired, they really technically currently, the re-elected senators have no committee assignments. Remember again that it is the organizing resolution that assigns senators to their committees. And yes, it assigns not just newly elected and re-elected members to committees, but reassigns members who are currently in the middle of their term, whose terms have not expired, and who were serving on these committees before. They do continue, generally speaking, in service in those committees and can be considered to remain members of those committees if you buy into the Senate as a continuing body theory. But again, a lesson for a different day. We've done it before. But newly reelected senators, even people who've been reelected for the, fifth time to those seats, Mitch McConnell, for instance, he's starting a new term. He has no committee assignments to date, technically. Now, a lot of members of the Senate consider it as a sign of senatorial courtesy to acknowledge that they still are members of that committee, but they're really not. Yesterday, everybody pointed to the Commerce Committee hearing that had been convened for the purposes of nomination confirmation on Pete Buttigieg as Secretary of Transportation. And it caused panic/discomfort, at the very least, around Twitter and the internet to see that Senator Roger Wicker had taken the gavel to conduct this hearing in the Commerce Committee. And everybody said, well, that's because there's no organizing resolution in place that reorganizes the committee under the new conditions of this Congress. And he was the chair of the committee last time. And so the old organizing resolution still obtains in the Senate, and that's why he is the chairman. But that's only partially correct. Again, you get your news from the newspaper guys. That's the way you're going to get it. Yes, I guess he should still be considered the chair of the Commerce Committee, but that's not the case in all the rest of the committees. It just so happens that this is one of those committees where the Republicans who have retained their seats as being in the middle of their term are in the majority there. Okay, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Okay, let's see. We may have left off on a note that wasn't that. We've left less clarity on this than there ought to be, and we'll see if we can't step all the way through this one more time. So, and I tried to see. I think there's a lot of confusion around it, even among relatively smart and up-to-date observers of the situation. Had an exchange on Twitter yesterday with somebody who generally gets these things and was really missing my point. And I think the Commerce Committee, and maybe on purpose, really obscured what was going on and made it difficult to understand. The story circulated on Twitter that quite correctly that Wicker was wielding the gavel, but only told half the story as to why. They said with no new organizing resolution in place, he remains the chairperson. And then that ballooned out, and it's a useful story in some sense for Democrats, and I'll tell you why. But the story went forward that because there was no organizing resolution, all committees remained in Republican hands. And I'm sure Republicans would like you to believe that that's the case. The thing is that we need for Democrats to insist, and I think they'd be right here, insist that no, that's not the case. What has happened is that every senator who was reelected in November of 2020, or in this general election cycle, now occupies a seat with a new term, and with their term having expired from their previous service, everything expires with it, right? You saw that they all had to take the oath of office again, right? On January 3rd, when they came in, they were all senators who've been there forever, Mitch McConnell, etc., all had to take the oath again because they were entering upon a new term. The business of the old term having expired. There are, of course, 2/3 of the Senate at any given time who continue in office because they have 6-year staggered terms, and they're not reelected every 2 years like they are over in the House. We understand why over in the House they all take the oath over again and why they adopt rules again at the beginning of every 2-year Congress. But the Senate considers itself to be operating differently. That's a disputable point, but what's indisputable is that 1/3 of the Senate is considered joining the Senate as though brand new, whether that's the first time they've been elected or the 5th. Now, when they were in the middle of their term and the organizing resolution from the 116th Congress assigned them to committees, fine, their service on that committee begins. And very often, senators in the middle of their terms will switch committees, too. I mean, the next organizing resolution may very well reassign various, both Republicans and Democrats, as between committees. And if you are on the, let's say the Judiciary Committee, but you're in the middle of your term, and the new organizing resolution names you as a member of the Intelligence Committee, but not as a member of the Judiciary Committee, then as of the adoption of that organizing resolution, you are no longer a member of the Judiciary Committee. You could show up for a hearing, but if you seek recognition to speak or vote in committee, the chairman will rightly ask, "What are you doing here? You're not a member of this committee." How do I know? Because we've adopted an organizing resolution that says that for this Congress, for the last Congress, you were a member of this committee, but for this Congress, you are not. And you know what? We should actually take a look at, and I know I looked it up yesterday over at congress.gov, but just to be sure, we should take a look at the actual language of an organizing resolution to give you some sense of what they actually say. Let's see. We have to look at the one from the 116th Congress, and I think it was, I had to keep searching and searching to try to find the thing. They are usually, Senate resolution something, and they're, offered at the beginning of the Congress, so they tend to be low numbers. And let's see, was it Senate resolution? Let's see, I went all the way up to 10. Was it like 12? Let me go with Senate resolution 12. That's what my browser history tells me might have been it. Yeah, here we go. So last Congress, 116th Congress, Senate Resolution 12, a resolution to constitute the majority party's membership on certain committees for the 116th Congress or until their successors are chosen. Very interesting title, don't you think? We'll see why in a second. The text of it is pretty simple, and it's not always the case that they do one for the majority and one for the minority, but it has been the recent practice. They've, in the past, done one single resolution with both parties' nominations to, appointments to the committees included in one single resolution. But in this case, Senate Resolution 12 is for the majority parties' membership on the committees. That would have been the Republican sense. So here it is. Mr. McConnell submitted the following resolution, which was considered and agreed to. The resolution was this: to constitute the majority party's membership on certain committees for the 116th Congress or until their successors are chosen. Resolved that the following shall constitute the majority party's membership on the following committees for the 116th Congress or until their successors are chosen. The real key part here is for the 116th Congress. And then they go through the committees alphabetically. First, Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry. Mr. Roberts, Mr. McConnell, Mr. Boozman, Mr. Hoven, Ms. Ernst, Mrs. Hyde-Smith, Mr. Brown, that would be Braun Brown, whatever his name is, Mr. Perdue, Mr. Grassley, Mr. Thune, Mrs. Fisher. Okay, so that closely tracks with what's going on over. If you go over to the committee site, you will find a listing, and you can find all the different committees at senate.gov for a handy thing. And then there's a little thing on committees, and you can click on that, and it gives you a list of the committees. And first up, and alphabetical order is agriculture. There it is. If you go to the actual site and you go to the About section and hit committee membership, you will find that it mirrors for the Republicans exactly what it said in Senate Resolution 12. Here it is. In fact, listed as chairman of the Agriculture Committee is Pat Roberts of Kansas, and other members of the majority, Mitch McConnell, John Boozman, John Hoeven, Joni Ernst, so just the same members as were mentioned in the organizing resolution, and in the same order, by the way, as that implies their seniority on the committees. Now, something else you could look up if you wanted to, you would be able to find on the Senate site the members of the different classes of senators. There's a class 1, class 2, class 3. It's not about caste or rank. That's instead, those are the terms that they use to describe the years in which those Senate terms are up and will stand for re-election. The 2020 election cycle was for election to Class 2 of the Senate. Class 3 will be up for election in 2024. Then it rotates back around, I guess, to Class 1, who will be up for election in 2022 will be up in Class 3, and Class 1 will be up in 24, and then in 26, Class 2 comes around again, etc. And anyway, one of the real anomalies, I guess, of Class 2 is that it is very heavily weighted towards Republicans. It just sort of happens to have worked out that way in the past. I don't think that there's anything particularly weird about how that, that no weird thing that happened that made that go on. It just happens that, Republican seats were, or the seats that were assigned to this class before any of these people occupied them. As it turns out, now they are occupied largely by Republicans. So, anyway, the senators in Class 2 elected in this time around, and are elected to office in 2014 for this term. Their term ended at the end of 2020, or January 3rd, 2021. And they include the Democrats. The class is small. I think there's only 12 of them. Senator Booker, Senator Coons, Senator Durbin, Doug Jones, Ed Markey, Jeff Merkley, Gary Peters, Jack Reed, Gene Shaheen, Tina Smith, Tom Udall, and Mark Warner comprise that's the Democratic component of Class 2. Now, over on the Republican side, you have some whose seats were up for election but who had retired, like Lamar Alexander. You also have West Virginia's, how does she pronounce it? Shelley Capito. Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, Susan Collins, of course, infamously reelected, John Cornyn, Tom Cotton, Steve Daines, Michael Enzi, Joni Ernst, Cory Gardner, who of course lost, Lindsey Graham, Cindy Hyde-Smith, Inhofe, McConnell, Perdue, who lost, right? Jim Risch of Idaho, Pat Roberts, Mike Rounds, Ben Sass, Dan Sullivan of Alaska, and Tom Tillis in North Carolina. I say Pat Roberts because we switch back over here to the list of the committee membership and find as chairman in agriculture, the first among the alphabetically listed Senate committees, Pat Roberts is the chair. And as we know, back in early 2019, January 9th, 2019, with the adoption of Senate Resolution 12, the Committee on Agriculture is to include Roberts, McConnell, Boozman, Hoeven, Ernst, Hyde-Smith, are bells ringing here for you? Brown, Perdue, Grassley, Thune, and Fisher. It's assumed from the fact that he's named first that Roberts will assume the chairmanship, but he's the top-ranking Republican on the Agriculture Committee for when? for the 116th Congress. That's what the resolution says. Not the 117th, not the 115th, but the 116th Congress. The 116th Congress now is over. And really, honestly, it's possible for you to consider all of those appointments to the Agriculture Committee to be expired. But because the Senate considers itself to be a continuing body, it also considers its committees to be a continuing, or to be smaller, more discrete continuing bodies. And so the members who have been appointed there and not reassigned by any new reorganizing committee might perhaps assume that their service on the Agriculture Committee continues. But Mr. Roberts, named just like everybody else by Senate Resolution 12, also has the unique, well, not that unique, but the interesting wrinkle that the term of office as a senator that entitled him to a seat on the Agriculture Committee also expired, and he now occupies a new one and begins anew. He is in want of a committee assignment at this point. In other words, over at Agriculture, the committee makeup for the Republican side now no longer includes Pat Roberts, no longer includes Mitch McConnell, no longer includes Joni Ernst, no longer includes Cindy Hyde-Smith. Everybody else is fine, and of course no longer includes Kelly Loeffler, who was not included in the Senate Resolution 12 because she hadn't yet been appointed to the Senate in place of Johnny Isakson. But at any rate, she, of course, was listed among their membership at the end of the last Congress, but she's out now, so there's no point in naming her. So in other words, we have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, including Loeffler, Republicans sitting on the Agriculture Committee at the end of the 116th Congress. What did we say, 11? So it was 9 Democrats on that committee as well. By the way, in case you were interested in who it was, it's Senator Stabenow, the ranking member, Pat Leahy, Sherrod Brown, Amy Klobuchar, Michael Bennet, Kirsten Gillibrand, Bob Casey, Tina Smith, and Dick Durbin are the 9 Democrats on the committee from last time around. Now, in the 117th Congress, Pat Roberts, he's back in Congress, but technically he hasn't been assigned to any committees yet. Mitch McConnell, back in Congress, but not assigned to any committees yet. Joni Ernst, same thing. Cindy Hyde-Smith, same thing. And of course, Loeffler out of here. So what we've got really is, let's see, Roberts doesn't count, McConnell doesn't count. Boozman, Hoeven, Brown, Grassley, Thune, Fisher. That's 6 of the Agriculture Committee Republicans who are still serving terms that weren't just renewed and might still be said to be sitting on the Agriculture Committee. Over on the Democratic side, Stabenow, Leahy, Brown, Klobuchar, Bennett, Gillibrand, Casey. That's 7. Now, Tina Smith and Dick Durbin are Class 2 senators. They have the same problem that McConnell and Hyde-Smith and Roberts have got. They're no longer really technically on the committee. But that makes the Agriculture Committee not evenly divided, for one thing, but majority Democrat. There are 7 Democrats still on the committee and 6 Republicans. So is it the case that Pat Roberts, by virtue of the previous organizing resolution, is still chairman of the committee? Highly questionable. And I would say, no, probably not, because he occupies a new term entirely. Had he been a Class 1 senator, you might think that was the case. But on the other hand, the chair of the committee is not designated by the organizing resolution. Lots of the excuses for why Wicker was still in the chair at Commerce for the consideration of the Buttigieg nomination. Why does Commerce take it? Because it's actually Commerce and something else, and Transportation Committee is their jurisdiction over there on the Senate side. They don't have a separate Transportation Committee like the House does. But anyway, the excuse given was, well, under the old organizing resolution, which continues until the new one is adopted, he was chairman. But no, under the old organizing resolution, if you take a look down at the Committee on Commerce, and here it is, Commerce, Science, and Transportation, it does name him first: Wicker, Thune, Blunt, Cruz, Fisher, Moran, it goes on and on. But nowhere in any of these things does it say that the first listed person is or is even assumed to be the chair of that committee. So it's just flat wrong to say that the previous organizing resolution gives the gavel to anyone. The gavel goes to the person who can muster a majority vote to wield the gavel at the organizing meetings of the committee once it's constituted. But if the committee were to meet now, it would be 7-6 Democrats. And presumably in a vote over who should chair the committee, because this will happen eventually. It's not even any real skin off the Republicans' nose here. If Stabenow is remaining on the committee, but in all likelihood she would take the gavel, and she would do so. She'll do so actually in a tie vote, most assuredly, as they might, for sake of appearances, agree under the power sharing agreement to vote for Stabenow as chair. But at any rate, if it were a contested vote, the Dems at the moment, even if the members whose terms are expired are, if they tried to vote, I don't know whether the parliamentarian would let them at this point, but it would be 7-6 for Democrats, which, by the way, is also a bit of a problem in that the power sharing agreement that Democrats are being asked to agree to split, it asks, of course, for the committees to be split evenly. So right off the top, just alphabetically speaking, in the Agriculture Committee, the proposal is that Democrats move from the status quo, in which they hold a one-vote advantage on the Agriculture Committee, to a tie, where they hold no numerical advantage, but they do manage to get and secure the gavel. But the gavel isn't the Republicans to grant at this point. It belongs to the most senior member who can garner a majority of the votes of the current members of the Agriculture Committee, and that's Debbie Stabenow. So there is even more being given up in this power sharing agreement by Democrats than might first meet the eye. Now, why was everybody saying that the opposite was true over in the Commerce Committee? And the answer to that one is you got to go over and take a look at the membership from the 2016, or rather the 116th Congress, ending in on the January 3rd, 2021. If you go over and take a look at the committee makeup there, it has, from last Congress, lists Roger Wicker from Mississippi as the chairman, and that is by virtue of the fact that he holds a majority on the committee. He's there with John Thune, Roy Blunt. We have to, why isn't it? I guess I'll have to click through to a different page. Wicker, Thune, Blunt, Cruz, Fisher, Moran, Sullivan, Gardner, Blackburn, Capito, Lee, Johnson, Young, and Rick Scott from Florida are the majority members of the Commerce Committee. The minority members, last time around, Maria Cantwell, Amy Klobuchar, Blumenthal, Schatz, Markey, Udall, Peters, Baldwin, Duckworth, Tester, Sinema, and Rosen. So how many have they got over there on the Republican side? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Of that 14, let's see. Moran, I believe, is he in class 2? Let me just double check on that one. I think that's the case. Oh, no, I guess not. So, all right, well, let's continue on with this then. Who did they lose from their ranks? Not Moran. Sullivan from Alaska, Gardner, who lost, Capito, who is in Class 2. Anybody else? No, 3. So they have 14, and they're down to 11. Over on the minority side, there are 3, 6, 9, 12 members from last Congress. Of the 12, anybody, let's see, Ed Markey is in Class 2. Tom Udall has retired. His term has expired. That's 2. Gary Peters is in Class 2. And I think that's it. But that's 3 of the 12, so that brings them down to 9. So the current constitution of, the current makeup of the Senate Commerce Committee is, what did we say, 11 Republicans and 9 Democrats. So, unfortunately, this is one of the committees where it doesn't work out. If you freeze everything in place, Roger Wicker would likely be the chair of that committee, and that's the assumption by virtue of which he was said to be chairing this committee for the hearing on the confirmation of Pete Buttigieg. In other words, even if if I'm right, even under my conditions, Republicans would in fact hold the majority currently and chair the Commerce Committee. But that was overread because the only hearings going on that were televised that people were paying attention to was the ones in the Commerce Committee. People viewed the continued chairmanship of Senator Wicker to mean that Republicans were in charge of all the committees, and that's not true. Now, why might that be a convenient fiction? Because, as we've discussed before on the show, and I've discussed on Twitter for many months now, over at the, what do they call this committee that he sits on? Energy and Natural Resources is where the infamous Joe Manchin sits as ranking member. The committee which in which he would take the gavel under the power sharing agreement, and he would take control of an evenly divided committee. I need to make a note for myself for research later. But okay, so he stands to get the gavel there. Now, one of the problems with using the nuclear option to get rid of the filibuster for legislation, whether it's for important legislation on COVID relief or anything else that people are thinking about, is that Joe Manchin has said pretty consistently, I oppose the use of that mechanism for getting rid of the filibuster. I'd like to see the filibuster preserved. That's his position. And with only 50 votes to draw from in the Senate, it makes it very unlikely, if not impossible, that you can't pull the nuclear option off and overrule the ruling of the chair if it's correctly given, or sustain the ruling of a chair if incorrectly given. That 51 votes or a bare majority, however you want to phrase it, would be enough to invoke cloture. If you don't have Joe Manchin, you don't have the votes to make the nuclear option work, and you got a problem. However, as people were pushing for it anyway and saying, well, we just got to bring Joe Manchin around to this position that this is an untenable view for him. Can't be sure whether or not Republicans being able to block COVID-19 relief will mean enough to him. Don't know. Maybe. And people are guessing that it might. Don't know if, any particular legislative interest would be enough for him. But while I saw all sorts of people saying there just was nothing that would ever bring him around to it, I even saw Sarah Binder of Brookings Institution and the Monkey Cage blog over at Washington Post back in early November. We were all discussing this, that there was just nothing that she could see that would bring Joe Manchin around to changing his mind. I said right then and there that, well, one of the things that might bring Joe Manchin around to changing his mind is, let's see what happens when Republicans filibuster the organizing resolution next Senate when the Democrats have a tenable claim to a majority. Or maybe we thought they might even win an outright majority. and he's denied chairmanship of his committee. That might change his mind, or at least even if he wasn't up for a chairmanship. I wasn't sure offhand at the time whether he was, or whether his fellow Democrats were denied the chairs that they were entitled to, and therefore legislation that he was interested in wasn't moving, whether in other people's committees or his own. Whether he would stick to his guns, or whether he would simply say, yeah, we can just move forward without committees and an unorganized Senate for the next 2 years, or whether he might change his mind. Pretty good prediction. It's looking pretty good, because that might be what does it. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, and we already have some questions stacking up here, but okay, I think everybody kind of, sort of has got the point, but basically, I guess we can condense it down to this. The fact that Wicker has a claim currently to retain the gavel in the Commerce Committee does not mean that the situation is the same in other committees. The useful fiction here is preserving that, because at the moment they've actually got Joe Manchin, I think, I don't know, maybe other people are speaking out of turn for him, but it seems like they've got Joe Manchin riled about the prospect of seeing the organizing resolution blocked, because he currently believes that the Republican filibuster of an organizing resolution will prevent him from taking the gavel in the, what do they call it again? The Energy and Natural Resources Committee, where for some reason he believes Lisa Murkowski retains the gavel, though I'm telling you she really does not. Over in that committee, she is, was the chair. And let's take a look at the members over on Energy and Natural Resources. The Republicans are Murkowski, Barrasso, Risch, a member of Class 2, by the way, Mike Lee, Steve Daines, another member of the Class 2, Bill Cassidy, Class 2, Cory Gardner, he lost, also Class 2, but he lost, Cindy Hyde-Smith, she lost, or no, I'm sorry, she won, but member of Class 2, wishful thinking there, Lamar Alexander, member of Class 2, and retired as well, and then John Hoeven. So what do they have there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do I have to count it? I might as well. We'll go through every step here, but you know where this is going, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, down through Cassidy, 7, 8, 9, 10 Republicans on Energy and Natural Resources. Over on the other side, the Democrats, Joe Manchin, Ron Wyden, Maria Cantwell, Bernie Sanders, Debbie Stabenow, Martin Heinrich, Mazie Hirono, Angus King, and Catherine Cortez Masto. Dang, I lost count already. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 members, none of whom are members of Class 2. They all continue in office right now. So 9 of them. And on the Republican side, how many do we have left? Murkowski, Barrasso, Lee, and Hoeven. That's 4. Energy and Natural Resources is 9-4 Democrats right now. The ranking Democrat at the moment is Joe Manchin, and if he were to convene the committee and call a vote, there would be 9 votes for his taking the gavel and 4 against. And that would be that. He has a 5-seat advantage on his committee right now. And if the Republicans continue to block the organizing resolution, it will stay that way, or should anyway. Now, I guess it's something of an open question. How will the parliamentarians rule on this? And each committee has its own parliamentarian, too. Now, at the moment, the parliamentarian probably is one that was hired by the Republican leadership from the last Congress. But the parliamentarians do tend to be sticklers for the rules. And, of course, there are probably others or who have served Democratic chairs on those committees in the past who are available and could be, well, certainly will be hired, I guess, going forward. But they might even retain a lot of the old parliamentarians because they are pretty nonpartisan professionals for the most part. Anyway, the point is that Joe Manchin can and should go and claim his gavel. But it might be more convenient for the moment if we pretend that the Republican filibuster of the organizing resolution is what's preventing him from taking the gavel. And as long as he believes it, he might vote, at least conditionally, for or be willing to threaten to vote for a limited nuclear strike on the filibuster, if not totally wiping it out, in order to clear the path for an organizing resolution to be adopted here so that he can take the gavel officially with a full complement of senators, and he might actually be looking forward to working with an evenly divided Energy and Natural Resources Committee. But if he's looking for partisan advantage and some power, it's actually available to him right now. But I think nobody wants to tell him because then, I guess it's possible that he may say, to hell with the rest of you, I get my gavel. I don't know if he's really deep down that kind of a person. I'm sure he's got some other friends elsewhere who might be denied their gavel by locking in place, just what remains active of the organizing resolution from the 116th Congress. Now, okay, so I surveyed it across the board, and as it turns out, the majority of the committees end up in Democratic hands and with sometimes significant majorities. Sometimes it's a close call, but basically anything that's a tie or better is, should be considered no loss from what will eventually be the status quo, where all the committees are going to be tied. There are some key committees where, through some anomaly or another, Republicans would remain in control. But it shouldn't surprise you that the majority of the committees would turn over to Democratic control, given that there were only 12 Democratic senators in Class 2, and I never did count the Republicans for you on here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, pardon me, 18, 19, 20, 21. Do I have that right? 21 seats in Class 2 held by Republicans. So almost twice the number of Republicans up for re-election, and we knew that going in, than there were Democrats. So here's my list. Basically, the Agriculture Committee should be in Democratic hands currently, without the organizing resolution, with a majority. Appropriations would be in Democratic hands. Armed Services, Banking. Originally, I think I screwed this one up in doing the count, but I think even the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee in Democratic hands. The Budget Committee, where Bernie Sanders is scheduled to take over as chair, is currently tied, so no skin off anybody's nose there. It would be tied anyway. Energy, Finance, the Rules Committee, not nearly as powerful in the Senate as it is in the House, but the Rules Committee is in majority Democratic hands. Might become important at some point. The Intelligence Committee, Small Business Committee, they're tied on the Select Committee on Aging, in case you were interested. Ethics Committee, which is supposed to be tied all the time anyway, also remains a tie. As it happens, instead of the 3-3 even split among members of both parties, the losses to Class 2 leave it at a tie still. It's 1-1. There's only one member from each side remaining at the Ethics Committee. And the Veterans Affairs Committee also falling into Democratic hands. Now, where do Democrats lose control of committees? There are some key ones. Commerce, the one we told you about yesterday and the one everyone was pointing to with Roger Wicker in the chair, is one of them. The other one you'll immediately notice is missing from the list of Democratic-controlled committees is Judiciary Committee. That worries people because, of course, there's lots of work to be done in appointing Biden nominees to the bench and other reasons. We'll get to that in a minute. The Environment Committee, the Foreign Relations Committee, Homeland Security Committee, and Indian Affairs Committee all would remain ostensibly under, if there's no organizing resolution, in Republican hands. And we don't really want to not be in control of some of those in particular. The big ones being Homeland Security, Judiciary Committee, Foreign Relations to an extent, also a concern, commerce, environment. They certainly cover a lot of areas that traditionally would have jurisdiction over major pieces of the legislative agenda in the Biden administration. So potential trouble there. And of course, as we have mentioned, if the trial of Democratic, or rather, if the trial of Donald Trump is moved to committee in order to preserve an open Senate floor for other business, in all likelihood, that would be sent to the Judiciary Committee, which is one of the places where currently the old organizing resolution is still obtaining. Democrats don't have a majority. So that's kind of tough. But on the other hand, there is this bit of news. Well, one, I just want to point out to you, like if you sent it to Judiciary Committee to handle this thing, one problem with having the current Judiciary Committee handle this is that Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz are both on the Judiciary Committee for the Republicans. And really, they have no business continuing to serve there, given what they did. They certainly would have no business sitting there helping to conduct the trial of Donald Trump. Now, before we get too caught up in that and to worry about that too much, it's a problem for judicial nominations, but shouldn't be a problem for committee consideration of the impeachment of Donald Trump, because ordinarily those impeachments aren't, in fact, conducted by the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. They are conducted by special select committees appointed exclusively for the purpose of conducting those those impeachment trials when they're impeaching judges. That is to say, non-presidential impeachments that aren't conducted on the floor. So while Republicans could still attempt to nominate Hawley and Cruz to that committee, it might be the case that Democrats are able to prevent that from happening on the floor, where they just like members are named to standing committees by Senate resolution, so they would be named to an impeachment committee by Senate resolution as well. But in a 50-50 Senate, it might be questionable how much sway Democrats have in influencing who gets assigned by the Republican conference to that special committee. But at any rate, it isn't necessarily the case that if they decided on holding the trial in committee that it would happen before Hawley and Cruz. But there you have it. Just by, coincidence, maybe, unless they were really clever in plotting this out, the one nomination that started to move forward yesterday visibly to everyone on C-SPAN was in the Commerce Committee for Pete Buttigieg. I mean, maybe, if they're really super geniuses, they said, yeah, let's have that happen immediately so that we can have it in a committee where Republicans retain the majority, and we can make the claim that we continue to hold the gavel in all of these committees, and people will just believe it because they don't know what the hell else is going on. Now, is it possible that the whole thing is wrong? Is it possible that, in fact, the Senate practice is that returning senators are assumed to retain and return to their seats on committees, given where they were assigned last time? Well, there's no real reason to believe it because, as we mentioned at the outset, the resolution that they're depending on very clearly says that it only applies to the 116th Congress. But we have that weird anomaly where the Senate thinks it's a continuing body, and so its committees think they are continuing bodies. And so even though the senators whose terms continued from the 116th into the 117th Congress uninterrupted or unrenewed, as the case may be, their nominations to the committees, their appointments to the committees only last technically for the 116th Congress. But whatever, they have this fiction about them continuing. But that certainly shouldn't and really couldn't apply to senators who are in a new term. They took the oath and everything. They start anew. But if you watched the full hearing over on the Commerce side, and I didn't, but I did pick up the video just to check and see, what did Wicker do? Did Wicker allow returning members of Class 2 to sit and ask questions of Buttigieg as though they were still members of the Commerce Committee? Yes, he did. Should that have been allowed? Probably not. Was it possibly simply allowed out of senatorial courtesy? That it was Wicker's assumption that an organizing resolution will eventually be worked out and adopted, and I think everybody still agrees that it would be. And that given that, there was really no point in antagonizing members of his committee from last Congress who were presumably going to continue as members of the committee in this Congress. Possibly true, that might have been the case. And do the chairs of these committees in hearings like this retain a prerogative to allow members of the Senate, but who are members who aren't members of the committee, to come and ask questions if they have some particular interest in a certain nominee? And generally speaking, yes, they do. They can afford that privilege to other senators if they want to. And under that authority, Wicker, too, could have allowed that to happen. And he allowed it to happen both for Democrats, who ordinarily shouldn't be considered members of the committee at this point, and Republicans. So he did it rather even-handedly. And it might just be that. It might just be that he hasn't thought of anything. It might just be that once he, the Democrats may have said, well, if we're going to allow this to go forward with Wicker as chair, as long as he's willing to allow me a voice working in the committee, even though I haven't been reappointed to the committee, I'm fine with it. But really, at some point, somebody ought to say something about this. And, I don't want to suggest it to Manchin because whatever, but he's got the strongest case going. And I really don't think it would dissuade him from recognizing the importance of settling on an organizing resolution, whatever the contents are, so that Republicans don't claim the chairmanship of Homeland Security and the Judiciary Committee and the Commerce Committee and Environment and the rest. But we are in a similar situation. This has happened before. I guess really we can just end with this point. I was going to say, maybe it's the case that senators don't see it my way. They see it a different way. And that's what accounts for the Commerce Committee operating this way, not my explanation for why the Commerce Committee was able to operate this way. But like I said, we've been here before, and I was pointing this out yesterday, but now we're at the point where we say, I don't know who needs to hear this, but I know who needs to hear it. It's ironic, but anyway, who needs to hear this? Everybody, every Democratic senator. They spent the day yesterday on Twitter messaging. This was clearly a coordinated effort, messaging the absurdity of McConnell holding up an organizing resolution over the nuclear option and the filibuster. And the messaging was, the filibuster doesn't belong anymore. It's a relic of Jim Crow. All of this is true. But some of them making the connection between McConnell's demands on the filibuster and his holdup of the organizing resolution. Anyway, I think that they needed to be aware of the fact, and I tried to make them aware, at least as far as Twitter empowers me to do this, that what McConnell's doing here isn't new or unique. McConnell has done this before. I think it's worth noting, as they say, this unprecedented obstruction from Mitch McConnell. It's not unprecedented. Mitch McConnell has done this before. The first day, really, that he became majority leader, when Bill Frist was on the way out and McConnell was on the way in, back at the end of 2006. In December of 2006, post-election, when it was pretty clear what was going to be going on in the 110th Congress, which would begin in January of 2007, and had a bare majority in favor of the Democrats. I think we were talking along with the two independents who were caucusing with Democrats, 51-49 in the Senate. 49 Dems, 49 Republicans, two independents who were caucusing with Democrats. And, I don't really mean to upset you in the morning, but one of them was Joe Lieberman. But remember, he had just been reelected as an independent. And this was a step down from the prior Congress, where there was a much larger, well, not much, it was a larger Democratic majority then. And so they claimed a larger portion of the committee seats. The ratio was much more in Democrats' favor then. And now it declining to 51-49, McConnell, who wasn't even in the majority or close to it, he was closely divided, but there was a clear majority on the floor of Democratic voting senators, still said, well, we ought to have committee ratios much closer to 50-50, if not 50-50. And he may even have demanded 50-50 ratios in the Senate, given how close things were. He viewed it as a 49-49 Senate with two independents out there who were possibly in play. Remember, one of them was Lieberman. It was entirely possible that they might have been able to pull him over to their side at some point. And in 2007, the vice president and presiding officer of the Senate would have been Dick Cheney. So based on this, at that point, McConnell said, well, you know what? If we don't get our way on the committee ratios, I'm going to see to it that we filibuster the organizing resolution. In other words, he's done it before. This is his second time around the block threatening to filibuster the organizing resolution. And as a matter of fact, it was the first thing he did as Republican leader, was to threaten to filibuster the organizing resolution. Well, we had the same problem then. And in my discussion of the situation then, and not only on the blogs, we didn't have Twitter to do it then, but with people who were in position to relay the news to the Democratic Senate leadership at the time, if you take a look at the way the situation breaks down in the committees, filibustering the organizing resolution leaves Democrats with considerable majorities that they won't have later if there's an equitable organizing resolution adopted. If Republicans filibuster it, Democrats will retain enormous majorities on some very important committees. So you might deliver the news to McConnell, go ahead, filibuster the organizing resolution, you're only hurting yourself. And I guess that message was relayed because that threat to filibuster the organizing resolution for the 110th Congress fell apart almost immediately, like within hours of that message being, of that news being discovered. I can't vouch 100% for who delivered the message to whom and where they got the information from. But given that I was in communication with some people who were working in the offices of Democratic leadership then, it's highly likely that got passed on. And they took a quick look at the committee rosters and said, you're right. In order for that to be the case, though, I would have to be right in my interpretation of what happens to members who are reelected and just think that because they were on the Agriculture Committee last time, they're also members of the Agriculture Committee now. It may depend on clarifying things for these members at some point real soon, perhaps with the help of the committee parliamentarian. But I'd be very interested to see whether there are other nominations hearings going on today or in the next couple of days in committees where Democrats could and should simply take the gavel and insist that Republicans who might think that they're returning to this committee to reclaim a working majority at the moment aren't actually members of the committee. Now, again, that also does require telling some in some cases, relatively senior Democrats that they don't have any committee assignments at the moment. And they're not going to be happy about that. Remember, again, the list. You're talking about telling Cory Booker, Chris Coons, Dick Durbin, who's set to take charge of the Judiciary Committee once the organizing resolution is in place, that he doesn't have a seat. Ed Markey, you don't want him without a seat on his committees. Jeff Merkley, Gary Peters, Jack Reed, Jean Shaheen, Tina Smith. Tom Udall, of course, is gone. And Mark Warner, also important to the Intelligence Committee there. All of them would technically, by this measure, not have seats on those committees. But in the meantime, they are telling Democrats who are newly elected to the Senate, right, the two new senators from Georgia, the new appointed senator from California, and everybody who won their seats in the 2020 election, that they, too, will not get seats on committees. I don't know what happened with what's his name? The new senator from Arizona. Why is his name not Mark? I can't bring it to mind here. All right, fine. Anyway, you all know who I'm talking about. I don't know whether he got his committee assignments, Mark Kelly, or not. It's possible that a resolution may have been adopted since he took his seat very shortly after the elections in November that placed him temporarily, at least, on a committee somewhere. Anyway, there you have it. Important message to carry to your senators, your Democratic senators, particularly if any of them stand to take the gavel in any committees anywhere, that maybe they want to just go ahead and grab it because it's available to them. Now, let's see. Other comments that came in along the way. I did see that Mike Stark was listening live and was wondering and asked the question, what is the impact on impeachment, the impeachment trial, if there's no organizing resolution? If the trial's held on the floor, and this is maybe the best argument for holding it on the floor, there should be no issue because, of course, so far the Democrats' majority has been uncontested on the floor. Schumer is recognized and has been recognized as majority leader, and there's no difficulty there. And on the other hand, if it's handled in committee, there will be some assignments made. They'll have to create this committee out of whole cloth, and presumably it'll be done with an eye toward the power sharing agreement that they'll eventually settle on, and the organizing resolution they'll eventually settle on, and they'll evenly divide the impeachment committee. So I guess that'll be okay. It shouldn't affect how things are handled there. But I guess if they decide, if they can't get to anything, if they filibuster, and this is a problem, they could filibuster the resolution establishing the impeachment committee. That's a problem. But if the rules are that once the articles are exhibited in the Senate, they've got to begin a trial, and they don't want to do it on the floor, so they want to move it to committee, but the Republicans filibuster the formation of a committee. I don't know what the rules say about filibustering a resolution establishing a committee. We've not been there. But I guess if it happens, you could use one of the standing committees instead. You just wouldn't want it to be Judiciary. But again, with floor control, you could send it to any committee you want, I guess, any standing committee. Give that to Joe Manchin and let the environment and whatever it was committee handle the impeachment. There's no reason they couldn't. Energy and natural resources. It would be odd, but that's one of the things they can do, which I guess brings us back to the point of the Democratic control of the Senate Rules Committee. Like we said, not as powerful as it is in the House, where they can adopt special rules specific for the consideration of individual bills and change the outcome of those votes by virtue of a differently structured rule. But the Rules Committee does retain jurisdiction over the question of committee jurisdiction. How do we know, and what is important about committee jurisdiction? When you submit a bill that would be about oil drilling, let's say, and it needs to be referred to committee for consideration, in all likelihood it would go to Energy and Natural Resources, perhaps, depending on what was in the contents of the bill, perhaps other committees as well. That's because it's generally assumed, not just that it's generally assumed, but that it's actually a matter of the Senate rules that oil drilling bills would be part of the jurisdiction of Energy and Natural Resources. But that's by rule. That can be changed. Of course, you get into the fight over how many votes does it take to change the rules on the Senate floor, and there you get into a possibility of a nuclear option as well. But you could, in fact, I guess, muscle through a rules change, or at least a rules interpretation that says that, well, I don't know, for some weird reason, impeachments of presidents who are no longer in office will be the jurisdiction of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. They would object to that on the Republican side, but you simply overpower them and send it there. And anything else that you're afraid of sending, say, to the Judiciary Committee or the Homeland Security Committee, you can, if you want to, rejigger the accepted jurisdiction of various other standing committees and send things there. Instead, that would create real problems, and you'd be threatened with all sorts of retaliation. But it's something that could be done. Maybe we consider it over the weekend.
From networksradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, another highly theoretical discussion that may or may not have put you to sleep for a Friday show. But, you know, Friday is for relaxing. You want to wind down and take advantage of the fact that Donald Trump isn't in office this time. You want some more exciting stuff? Well, stay tuned then for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam next. He'll wake you back up.